Hello everyone, welcome to a new banner review slash analysis. I'm sorry it took so long for me to get around to it. Life has been really rough to me, so I had little to no motivation to really work on this, but now I'm here, so let's get to work on this. Also, I'll probably have the refined tier list update today, depending on, how things goes. But, alright, let's get started. As per usual, I'm going by order of who's the weakest to who's the strongest. So first up is Ursula, because for some reason they decided... So Summer Lid was a mistake. Summer Guntra was just a poor movement type choice. How about we repeat this a third time? I have no idea what they're thinking. I genuinely have no idea what they're thinking. So, and on top of that, Summer Guntra and Summer Ursula are basically the same unit. Except, like, Guntra has one more health, I think, and one more death. And is basically a attack minus speed plus Ursula. And Ursula is just an attack plus speed minus Guntra. I don't understand. I don't understand. It just... How can you make mistakes like these? 52 bulk, looking cool. So, Scallop Blade, anyway. Scallop Blade takes penalty and gets an extra 5 attack, 5 speed out of it. It is very similar to the way Gyol works. Gyol just essentially takes a penalty and you get an extra follow-up and block the enemy follow-up. Except here you only get 5 attack and 5 speed. Now, as a dagger, it's not great. That said, or rather, for her, it's not great because her defense is so low. However, if you somehow manage to get a unit that's a good all-rounder unit, this type of effect would be fairly solid on them. Even if their defense, if their attack and speed are not too solid, the weapon can actually catch up the attack and speed up to par, while also allowing you to have an enemy phase and player phase, because this weapon is ideal for those units since you don't have, well, multi-phase dagger all too well. Like, most of them are just, you attack once, you debuff your enemy, and that's that. This is just an extra 5 attack, 5 speed. If you have something like attack smoke and speed smoke, you can probably just basically have an extra 12 attack and 12 speed over them, which is extremely helpful, right? It's very helpful. It's just that the type of unit that can really use this either already have a pref, like Matthew. Matthew is honestly a surprise. I was expecting them to just not take my refine, which they didn't, by the way, and take something absolutely pointless, but the dagger is actually pretty good. So he doesn't really need outside help like this. Saizo, but Saizo needs his dagger to really work in that way. It's just overall not great. However, if they use this skill and make it an A skill, well, characters such as Saizo would be able to really use that. Because, they're working off of debuffs. As a weapon, it's not fantastic, but as an A skill, it would do a fantastic job. Now, Defres Ruse, why do I say Fuse, is a fantastic skill, and I'm kind of impressed that they decided to go this way, because feint skills are honestly really underrated skills, some of the best debuff tool you can have in your B skill. Because chill skills are unreliable as fuck, but feint you can actually completely rely on where it is going to land, which is fantastic for you. However, now feints are kind of irrelevant now. That said, here is the reason why it's better. First off, it debuffs 2 stat by 5. Now, feints debuff 1 by 7, so alright, it's more or less equal to that extent. Until you realize it also inflicts guard effect. Wow. So wait until Attack Death Ruse becomes a thing, and that fucking B skill is insane. But Defres Ruse itself is still fairly decent. I would just say wait for Attack Death Ruse, And those kinds of tools are amazing for units such as Saizo, because attack def will mean that, because your speed is already good enough, it's basically -5 attack plus 5 defense / res for you. Well, yeah, plus 5 def, essentially. So the res is not debuffed, so dragons are still a danger, but you actually have an easier time dealing with armored units. Just an example of how well it can help. Plus, at that point, you are also shutting down Bolt Fighter and Vengeful Fighter without running Guardia yourself. That's pretty good. So, moving on to the comparison itself, no surprise, they're all fucking summer units because apparently colorless dagger calves needs to all be in the summer. Despite it being a terrible movement type combo into a weapon type. I don't understand why they're still doing this, but here we are, I suppose. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Now, that said, if you're comparing all the stat line, I would easily say Ursula is the best, though mostly at high merges. At low merges, they're all basically more or less equal outside of Lind. Lind requires merges to work. Why? Because our HP and defense are too low. 49 bulk, you're dying from most dragons at that point. Even Gen 1 dragons. You know, dragons with like a grand total of like less than 50 attack. Yeah, that's not great. Still, if you compare Ursula to Guntra, they're basically very similar. The only issue is that Ursula is a bit more res, which is a dead-ass stat for her in most cases. It genuinely is a dead stat. It will hardly ever help her, which is just kind of a shame. Because say they would just do, well, take full res and just spread it into 2 HP and 2 defense, she would be a lot better off. But then they would basically be the same as Guntra, except Ursula is more like the higher, better version at +10, because at +10, you don't really need speed plus anymore. No unit really needs speed plus if they have 34 base speed at +10. To give you an idea, you have 34 speed, 38 with +10, Fury pushed that to 41, then you had a own cav and you're already at 47 speed. That's without even a seal, that's without any drive or anything of the sort. You're already at 47 speed. Do you think you need speed plus at that point, or, you know, neutral speed on Guntra with that 50 speed? Probably not. It's the same logic, though. But, overall, it's still not exactly worth building, and honestly, I could still showcase a build, but the build is very simple. Every single dagger cav unit can use the same set. It's the same barb, brazen, heavy blade with a 3 cooldown skill now turned into 2 because of Barb Shuriken, and you call it a day. That's it. It's just, you don't have much to it. If that's all you've got, what's the point, right? So while she is the best of her kind is kind of like the absolute garbage kind, so why should you bother is the problem. Moving to Lelaina, so Broadleaf Fan is an insane dagger. In fact, I'm thinking of actually summoning one Lelaina because I want that weapon for a dagger unit if I want to build one down the line. This weapon is essentially using Blizzard. Now, Blizzard is Guntra's weapon, using penalty and adding them to your damage. It's a blade tome that works off the enemy's debuffs. This is an insane weapon, and yes, Lelaina can definitely make use of it. That said, while she can make use of it, I genuinely don't think her stat line is very decent with it. She can use the one-shot gimmick, but at that point, why don't you use the base version of her with a blade tome? It's literally easier to set up, she is easier to merge, she hits res instead of defense, because defense is typically in the 40s, 50s nowadays, while magic is like 20, 30. Like, what's the point? You literally gain nothing out of this. Her kit is solid, yes, but that's the only thing she really has going for her. Which is sad because when you look at the comparison, which is Elise, Elise is bulkier than her. Yes, Elise. You know, the lowest HP of this entire fucking game, at least talking about the base version, is bulkier than Lelaina. Great. Great start. And she has a speed stat. Now, Lelaina does have one thing going for her, if anything, and it's the fact that she can use sabotage skills and ploys. But even then, unless your team is really reliant on having a ployer on your team, it's probably not going to be that helpful. So really, at this point, the only thing you can really say is Elise is the better unit, Lelaina is the better support that can sometimes kill in one shot. It's a bit inconsistent, however, so be careful. And because she has no speed, unless you go speed plus with like life and death and stuff, which life and death would be a mistake, you want to have Fury, and hopefully Fury 4 to cover bulk. Then it's just not great. As for colored daggers, I'd say she is in a better spot than Ursula, especially as a red dagger. Same thing if Walt was a red bow, by the way. Red throwing units are a lot better than what we have here. The main issue that they really run into is that for a colorless one, they tend to have very little BST, so their attack is not good enough or not consistently good enough to the point where you don't really need to have a brazen active to even do some kind of damage, like Guntra does. Ursula to a lesser extent, but Guntra, Lind kind of requires to be in brazen range to be decent. The fact that you're red means that, first off, most of the meta that has a lot of defense is green, such as Surtur, such as Legendary Hector, and so on and so forth. There's quite a few green armored units. So having the combat advantage is really helpful. And in Ursula's case, not Ursula, but in Lelaina's case, she can actually more consistently one-shot some dragons. Not all of them, of course, but some of them. Well, not dragons, but armored units. Still, you get the point. That said, if you're going for an armored killer, well, you'll probably want an armored killer dagger from, say, Ryoma. Which is expensive, and it only comes down to, do you really want to do it? Attack Plus is only really good for one-shot builds, and otherwise I would genuinely recommend Speed Plus with Fury and Own Cav with maybe Speed Plus 3 as your seal skill. That's like 41 speed anyway, so, you know. That said, unless you really go out of your way to merge Lelaina and, you know, get the right Ivy, she's typically not worth your time outside of fodder. So, yeah. Anyway, moving on to Walt, which I gotta say, I think this is the first time Argon... No, actually, another art, which is New Year Rid. This is the second art he's done, and gotta say, I'm honestly surprised Walt looks this good. Of all people to actually get good art on the banner, I was expecting Lin. But I genuinely think Lin has the worst art of every character of this banner. Like, her art is serviceable, and Lelaina's art is slightly better. But Walt and Ursula just looks a lot better than those two, is the thing. They're just better. Now, speaking about the unit itself, his weapon is basically just, you know, typical weapon of the banner. This is the same as Ursula, so I won't get over it. Brazen attack speed 4. I know a lot of people that are like super hyped for this skill, and I honestly don't get why. Because most units that can really use Brazen, they don't tend to have a speed that's too low to begin with. Like, for example, Celica has 38 base speed because of her tome. And that's why you want Brazen Attack 3, Brazen Attack Speed 3 because in her weapon, because that pushes it to 45. If you already have enough speed to function as a unit before you get to the point of the Brazen proccing, then what's the point? Like, for example, let's just talk about Walt himself, right? You'd be running, say, Death Blow 4 with, like, own cav, and your bow, probably getting rid of it for a slaying bow, and you're already at 40 speed without like a speed refine, without a seal skill. 40 speed is already enough for the most part. And then you go in Brazen Attack Speed 4, and it's just like, do I really need 50 speed? In most cases, you won't even feel like Brazen Attack Speed 3 is that much worse than Brazen Attack Speed 4. It's just kind of eh. Now, Brazen Attack Speed 4 can work with something like a Brave Bow, but even then, that's a big if, because you have to get to the point where you take damage for the Brazen Attack Speed 4 to actually work. So it's very shaky. You either need to put this on a unit that has very, 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 very little speed, and hope to absolute God to not get killed in one round, or your speed is just so overkill there's no point, and the only thing you really gain from it is the attack. If all you gain from it is the attack, do not get Brazen Attack Speed 4, but rather wait for Brazen Attack Def 4, or Brazen Attack Res 4. If I'm being honest, Brazen Attack Speed is probably the worst of the Brazen Attack Brazens, just because of the way it works. You have to be able to function as a unit before it procs. If you have to wait for it to proc to work as a unit, probably not a good thing for you. Anyway, chill speed number 50 something, because you know we have to have everything that affects speed on your seasonal units, because they're just that good, right? I don't get it. They act as if anything that gives stats into speed is like the best thing ever. The meta has not been surrounded around speed since Ira, for God's sake. Like, it's been almost a year and a half since the last time the speed meta was relevant. You have certain speed units that can really work, yes, but they are not the meta. They never will be. Like, Ophelia is not a unit that relies on speed, neither is Reinhardt. Neither is Lelaina. No, they rely on chill res plus Ophelia to be cancer. The meta just has not been reliant on speed in fucking months. It's pointless. It really is. Anyway, moving to the comparison. So, Sue. Surprising no one. Sue is kind of just slightly worse. Walt has a worse stat line when it comes down to bulk. That much is certain. More or less so, anyway, because the thing is, Sue has a better mixed bulk and def and res, but Walt makes up for it in HP. And he also has more attack, which is very relevant in this day and age, especially considering bow unit with like 30, 31, 32 speed, 30, 31, 32 attack, don't tend to be too great, because they don't do enough damage, because the meta is reliant on you being a wall breaker like, say, Jamke, and Walt can actually make that work somewhat. With attack plus, with a brave bow, death blow 4, and horse buffs, you can actually hit almost a 60 attack, especially on higher merges where you can hit up to 62. This is actually fairly good for him and does give him a lot of options, and unlike Sue, he does not have too much speed, which is fantastic. Now if you use a brave bow set, the speed might be a bit lacking on lower merges, however, so if you're going for Brave Bow, Speed Plus might be better on lower merges. If you're on higher merges, Attack Plus is always going to be better, like +5 or higher. Attack Plus is always going to be better. That's just how it works. As for the sets, literally everything Bravelyn can work with works well on, well, Walt. Speaking of Bravelyn, I did not add her to the comparison, but Bravelyn is still better overall, because the thing is, Walt has a decent amount of depth to unlock Brazen, which is great, but his res is piss poor at best. He can typically take a hit still if his speed is good enough that he doesn't get doubled. Which, I mean, is fantastic for him because it can unlock multiple Brazens. So at that point you can run, say, Brazen Attack Speed with Brazen Attack Res or Brazen Attack Def, and then become a monster once you hit the Brazen range. Notice how I never spoke about Brazen Attack Speed? Yeah, that's because it's not good. Brazen Attack Def is genuinely better overall because it gives you a bit of defense in case you actually get hit again. Say you're actually, you know, careful and you take 19 damage or so. You're at 21 HP, Brazen Attack Def times 2, for example, and you're at 45 defense. You can actually take a hit from another armored unit, which is good. You have more options as a result. But the thing is, Bravelyn does not get hit by melee armored units, which is fantastic for her. It gives her a lot of options as a result. And mages don't do nearly as much damage to her as they do to Walt. And then add to this the fact that, well, her only weakness is really dragons. Walt is weak to dragons and mages, so he has more weaknesses. And on top of that is green for a class that's meant to be aggressive. So as a result, if he has to deal with reds, well, that's not great. And he doesn't get much against blues either, because he tends to have too much attack to begin with. The only time it's going to help him is probably against legendary Tiki, which is not consistent to say the least. So yeah, overall a okay unit, held back by color. Man, feels like that's a team. Speaking of team, hello Lynn, number 6. Great, I'm so glad to see Lynn in here. So, I was expecting your attack to be lower. I'm glad it's at least at 33. Her def is piss poor at best. And they decided to pull back on the same mistake they've done like a year ago with Wings of Fate Inoka. For whatever reason, they decided to just be like, ah yes, what is the most consistent armored units that you see? They tend to be green like Surtur, like Legendary Hector. Sometimes there's also Legendary Tiki that's very prevalent, and the rarest of all the bunch is probably Halloween Myr. Alright, let's make the unit blue. What? Why? Like, green armored units are everywhere! Everywhere! What do you gain from removing this? If she was a red bow unit, she would actually make her bow so good. So good. Because then the only unit that ends up against her that just completely would destroy her is Legendary Tiki. No one else. The fact that she's blue means that she beats Halloween Myr, great, and I guess Zelgius. Man, I've totally seen that guy in the past few months at this point. You gain nothing out of this. You gain nothing. Nothing! And they also go overkill on her speed. 41 speed on Merge without speed plus? Jesus. All you need is a buff at that point. And you're already at 47. 47 is kind of like the magic number for speed. So, I don't understand. Literally any color but blue would have been better. If she was green, she would do decent-ish against units such as Surtur, and, well, would also do pretty fine against Legendary Tiki, so Halloween Myr would be the only problem. But then they decided to make her blue instead, which means you're struggling against greens. Tiki is not even a surefire at this point. Because I'm gonna be honest with you, Tiki, even if you're blue, while it's blue and you have armor effectiveness, can still be dangerous. Tiki is just extremely bulky in general, and shuts down special typically. Which, yeah, that's rough. That's really rough. Thankfully our bow does help, because every time the enemy has full HP, she gets 4 across the board, which... to deal with Tiki is consistent, because Tiki has a decent chunk of speed. It's not amazing, so having that much speed does help for that one matchup. Every other matchup, though, she is kind of a sitting duck, if I'm being honest. So... yeah, it's not great. Sturdy impact is always good. Attack speed link is just why? You don't need 51 speed on a unit. What's the point of attack speed link? Jesus, give me aerobatics. See, aerobatics or fly formation would have been so much better on her. Aerobatics probably to go with the team of the banner, because that way you'd be able to teleport to every other unit that's on the banner, which is overall fairly helpful. But no, instead of aerobatics, so you can combo it into an attack dev bond, an attack res bond, or attack speed bond, or any fucking bond you want, what we get instead is attack speed link. Great, that's helpful. And the Stingar, which, I mean, that's just a C skill. Overall, she has a okay stat line, just held back because of her color. Wow, never seen that one before. Anyway, Walt is not nearly as held back as she is, by the way. So, speaking of comparison, here it is, surprising no one. Because Summer Takumi came last year, has a better stat line because his speed is not nearly as overkill, more HP, more defense, and less res. Now the bit about less res can be a bit of a problem, but he still has overall better bulk against dragons than Lin does. So, that's unfortunate. And also, Takumi is not held back by color. Takumi is, in my honest opinion, outside of Legendary Aln, probably the best archer of this game, because at the end of the day, he has a very balanced stat line. With 45 flyers, him getting killed by an armored unit is very, very rare, even at low merges, let alone if he's at high merges. And on top of that, 35-35 is insane stat line wise, and unlike Bright Cordelia that gets one-shot by everything in their mother, he can't take a hit. So hitting Desperation and Brazens is very well easy to do for this guy. Meaning, in other words, you can actually hit, oh, I don't know, double Brazen pretty consistently. Or maybe just one, and with like Life and Death as your A skill if you're at high merges. If you're not at high merges, Fury 4 is probably your best bet. Fury 3 is a decent other choice. If you have Fury 4, you're looking at 40 speed, literally unmerged, and good bulk of 25 def and 23 res with 40 HP. With 45 flyers, that's 31 def and 29 res. You're looking at your absolute worst, 69 bulk. That means, unless the enemy has 69 attack or more, he takes the hit. Unmerged. So then you add merges and you realize, oh god, he just doesn't die easy, does he? And the best part about this is you can run a Brazen as your seal skill. If you think you don't have enough speed because you're at low merges and you want attack plus, Brazen attack speed is a fantastic choice. And typically if the unit has enough speed to deny you from the double or the quad, they die in the first 2 arrows. So, yeah, as a Brave Bow unit, he is insane. And he can definitely work in a goat setting as well. That makes him insanely powerful, and just overall a much better unit than Lyn. The only reason why Lyn is even usable compared to him is the fact that she has a pref, and the pref gives 4 across the board. The armor killer effectiveness is cool and all, but because of her color, it doesn't really affect that much. The 4 across the board and the fact that she has 5 more BST than Takumi is what makes it work. Which is kind of sad, honestly, at the end of the day. But, alright. So, if it wasn't for that bow, I would not even make a build. But since that bow exists, here's the build. It's very simple. This is 45 def and 37 res on initiation. Obviously remove 4 across the board and add a Bane to it if you're on merge. Like I said, her speed is just super overkill. Literally nothing in her kit buffs her speed, and she's already at 55 speed because of the blue bow. That gives you an idea of how unneeded any of this is. If you go and have an attack plus and a speed plus Lyn, and for some reason you choose speed plus, I'm sorry, but what are you doing? Still, this set pushes the 71 attack mark, 45 def and 37 res, which allows her to easily take a blow if needed. Attack def bond is there because it combos into aerobatics very easily, which is why I was suggesting that should have been part of her base kit in the first place. So yeah, just overall, I suppose that's kind of it. She is the only unit that really feel like it brings something somewhat new to the table. Unlike Inoka, she can actually take a blow a bit easier because of her stat line and because of sturdy impact. Now that sturdy impact exists, actually, Inoka is actually in a lot better of a spot because it actually managed to, you know, cover the one weakness, which was her defense, which is great. That said, while Inoka is now a bit better because of sturdy impact, if you don't have sturdy impact or do not want to spend the fodder for it, yeah, no, Inoka is still just as bad as she used to be. So, yeah. I suppose that's all I have to say about this banner. So, hey. Guess I'm gonna see you guys in the next video, which should be the refined tier list video. See you later, y'all. Have a nice one.